All right. I wanted to, as we all wait for a few more people to join us, I'm going to introduce myself.
Diane, you're muted. I think.
Sorry about that. Wow. Okay, everybody, parents gathering, I wanted to welcome you here to this evening and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of the middle of the week during your dinner time. We hope it's early enough that you can still do what you need to do afterwards. We're excited to have you here, excited to connect, excited to share some information. Our intention with this presentation is to provide kind of a little bit of an overview of a few aspects of the junior year that are unique, but also kind of talk about a few things that are going on specific to comprehensive distance learning, and to acknowledge what we are all struggling with, but also to celebrate the positive, the growth and the resilience that we're seeing in our students, our parents, and our staff. So we're waiting a few more minutes before we get started so that all people can kind of join and we're on the same page at the same time. We'll just give it a few more. Yikes. Okay, let's see what time it is. All right, so I think we will go ahead and get started. I wanted to just give you a little overview of the format. We are going to kind of provide information for about 35 to 40 minutes tonight. We do have an open chat, so as you have questions or thoughts, please enter them in the chat. We're all going to try to field those as we end the presentation. We'll have about 20 minutes for some question and answer. We have our counselors here, our career and college specialist here, and our assistant principal here. At 6:30, we will end it, but Jen Marston and I will stay on if you have additional questions, because we know some folks have a lot more questions, and we're willing to kind of stay on a little bit later for anyone who cares to do that. Okay, and with that being said, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Brianna Trevina.
All right, so thank you, Diane, for that. So tonight our focus is going to be, we're going to give you all some calendar updates that are relevant to your juniors. And then we're going to talk about some important milestones in the adolescent brain development, give you some tips. And then we'll talk about how students are doing with distance learning and give you some percentages and just some facts that we're seeing from our own students at the high school. And then lastly, we'll talk about our students' character strengths and share with you what we did in advisory last week. We're having a little bit of some technical difficulties.
I have to apologize. It's popping all over the place, but we'll get back there to the right slide. Sorry, Brianna, you're handling this well.
All right. So, and then lastly, we'll have questions, times for questions and comments if you have anything that you want to add or address with the entire group. All right. So some of our contacts, Carrie Phipps, she is the 9th grade counselor, so she works with all of our freshmen. Diane.
I'm Diane Berry. Thank you, Brianna. I'm focused on all sorts of things right now, as you can tell. I work with 10th through 12th graders with last names A through HA.
And I'm, oh, I'm Brianna, and I work with HE through N.
And I'm Maurice Montero. I work with L through Z, 10th through 12th grade.
And I'm Jen Marsden. I'm the College and Career Specialist and the Aspire Coordinator. And so I mainly work with juniors and seniors, but also work with freshmen and sophomores who are interested in learning more about college and career pathways.
And then Karen Bratz, she is not able to join us tonight, but she is the counseling office manager and scholarship coordinator. So she will probably be interacting with your students, either, maybe starting at the end of this year or next year for scholarship stuff.
And Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, I'm Rebecca Garmati. I'm one of the assistant principals here at Ashland High School. Happy to be
Thank you,
here.
Rebecca.
All right. So oftentimes students or parents will wonder, what exactly do school counselors do? So that is what I'm here to tell you about. We address three main domains in the school setting, and that is academics. So we help with putting together schedules, making sure students are fulfilling their graduation requirements. And we also deal with social emotional support, and then college and career support as well. And some calendar updates. So this Friday at 7 p.m. will be our Winter Fine Arts Festival. And real quickly, I invite you to take a picture of this on your phone, or maybe if you want to write these dates down, that way you have them handy. And next Wednesday from 2:30 to 4:30, we have our distribution center open, and that is on campus at the high school. And the distribution center is for if your student has a book or any materials that they need to pick up, they can do that during this time. December 31st, the yearbook photo submissions are due. Yes, we are still doing a yearbook, so that'll be exciting to see what all we put in the yearbook this year. It's kind of a different year, obviously. Okay, so finals week is going to be February 2nd through the 4th. So we have about 6 more weeks left of this semester. And teachers are still trying to decide what finals weeks looks like. So as soon as they have a better idea, they'll send out some more information to parents and students on that. The end of the first semester is February 4th. And then we have spring break, a time that a lot of us are looking forward to, the 22nd through the 26th. Graduation is June 11th. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we can have graduation in person and have that celebration with our students and families. And then the last day of school for our juniors will be June 18th.
Thank you, Brianna. I'm going to move on to the next slide. And what we're going to talk about just very, very briefly when we think about kind of milestones in our adolescence is how unique the adolescent brain is. And some of you may be very well versed in this and some of you may not, but what's really critical is that we have, again, some basic knowledge of the real possibility of learning during this time. So as you look at this image here on the left, what we're looking at are actually color functional MRI images of different aged brains. And as you'll notice, they move from a 5-year-old to a 20-year-old. And the spot that we're specifically focused on up there is called the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is especially important because that is what houses what we call the executive functions. And executive functions are really those thinking abilities that bring us into maturity, that really make us so much different than a young child. And as you see that kind of list over there on the right, insight, judgment, impulse control, planning, strategizing, cognitive flexibility, problem solving. These are all really critical skills for being a student. And so we know that different students develop these at different rates, and we still need to really provide a lot of support for them around these kinds of skills. And they're also just important in terms of just basic decision making and emotional regulation. And so the reason that we're kind of showing you this is that when you look at your teen, that image of your teen's brain, you'll notice that that prefrontal cortex is still fairly green blue, which means it's really kind of just a little over midway through maturation and development. So really quickly, I would love folks, if folks know when the male prefrontal cortex and the female prefrontal cortex mature, go ahead and enter that in the chat. And let's see if we get an accurate, we have an accurate sense. It's kind of a fun thing to think about. Jen, is there anything, are we seeing any good guesses? You'd have to unmute yourself. Jen, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. 24 for women, 27 for men, mid-20s, 24 to 27, male 26, female 23 or 24, 28.
You know, this is interesting because when we talked to sophomore parents, they were kind of guessing lower than the actual numbers. Junior parents are kind of making assumptions older, which means junior parents are much more aware of how long it takes for this prefrontal cortex to mature. They've been through an additional year of adolescence. So on average, young women, it's around 23. On average, young men, it's about 25. Now, for those, you know, of us who are maybe neuroatypical in one way or another, maybe a little bit of ADHD or maybe a little bit on the spectrum, that actually takes longer. So the reason, again, we show you this is during this time, let's remember to be kind of compassionate and thoughtful about where our children are just in their basic development and what they can do. We do still need to use our prefrontal cortex to help them with all of these different executive functions. On the flip side of that, our adolescent brains are developing incredibly quickly. It's just one of the most, one of the fastest, times for development in our life. This period around 14, 15, 16, 17 is a period of what we call pruning. And again, some of you may or may not be familiar with this, but with pruning, what we know is that those synapses that are being used are being myelinated. That means the insulation, the kind of around them is getting thicker and thicker and thicker, which increases the speed of processing and makes this, the connection stronger. Those synapses that are not being used are actually dying off. And the reason our brains do this is because we kind of become specialists. We become very good at what we do a lot of. All right, so the reason why we want to kind of bring this up to you is that our adolescents are learning much more quickly than we can learn right now. And it's a really good idea for us to think about what they're spending time doing. Whether, and again, we have limitations during COVID, but as we talk throughout this presentation about ways that students are coping, that they're managing their mental health, their focus, that kind of thing, we really want to be supporting healthy habits. The good news here is that our kids are developing some really creative ways of navigating this time, and they're practicing that in a way that we know those synapses are becoming stronger and will serve them down the line in later life. So we'll talk more about adolescent brain development in a later presentation, but we wanted to remind you that your students still have immature brains, but brains that are wonderful and developing incredibly quickly. Jen?
This is me. Hey, so I'm Jen Marsden, and I am the College and Career Specialist for those of you who have gotten here a little later. So this slide is just to give you an idea, and I'm going to go ahead and throw something in the chat so I can close the chat. Get off my screen so I can see this. So I just put in the chat a link to the Ashland High School College Handbook, which I put together every year, and it's really geared to help juniors move through junior year and into senior year on the whole college and career pathway planning for their post-high school education or career track. So that's in there for you to check out at some point. So what the slide is just talking about, a lot of things that juniors and junior parents and guardians should be thinking about. So for juniors, getting kind of close to starting to really think about senior year and planning for post-high school education or career pathways. Still really important in terms of goal setting, attendance, being at your classes, looking at your course rigor, maintaining GPA. It's really important if students are looking at attending college to keep their course rigor up, but it's also important to really consider GPA as well. A lot of colleges use GPA to award merit scholarships, and I find it's really typical for juniors and seniors, some of them to really kind of want to load on AP classes, which I really admire when students really want to stretch themselves and really dive into certain topics, but it's really good to kind of keep in mind about having a balance of that as you're planning for senior year as well. Great time to still be exploring interests, students to, look at career pathways that they might be interested in. And we're kind of a little stymied right now in terms of looking for internships and volunteering, but hopefully we'll be moving in the next number of months. And a time to really start doing more research and be informed. So we have a series of college information nights from just College 101, learning about all the different educational pathways after high school and how you would go about applying to schools, to financial aid 101, how to find a college that's a good fit. So keep your eye out for those types of evening presentations for parents and students to start to learn those things junior year, because the more you start to think about the process of planning for post-high school education and career, it makes senior year a lot less stressful, because you have time to have for your students to be thinking about what they're looking for in a post-high school plan, for parents just start thinking about it, for you all as families to start having those conversations. And I really encourage that. And there's a lot in the college handbook. There's a whole college search section that has all sorts of questions that students should be asking themselves as they start to think about what schools they might be interested in. So this slide is about SCORE. SCORE is this really exciting new college and career search planning platform we have access to. We just started using it last year. SCORE, in case you're wondering, is a Gaelic word that stands for transition. We used it pretty extensively with our seniors last year and using it with our seniors this year. So every junior will get an account, and I think we're going to start working on this in advisory in February. And once students get an account, make an account, they're going to have access to all sorts of resources where they can explore career pathways, programs of study at colleges, search all different kinds of colleges, and use this whole rubric to kind of determine what colleges might be a good fit for them. Also, they can look at financial aid and costs of college on there as well. So one of the really cool things about SCORE is they have access to this U-Science assessment. It's an aptitude assessment and interest inventory that juniors will do as part of advisory in February or March. The assessment takes probably a couple of hours, so they'll kind of go through it on their own, on their computers or whatever devices they're using. And it's really a great tool. I was skeptical when we first were introduced to it last year, and we all went through and did the assessments and the interest inventory, and I was really pretty surprised at how well it pegged me. And it was really fun to all sit around and compare our aptitudes and interests and what kind of careers SCORE chose for us. So that's something to really look forward to. It'll be great students, and it will also be something your students can share with you. And it'll be something if you choose, well, we'll have an information night for parents sometime in February or March as well, so you can learn more about SCORE and how you could potentially use it as a jump off tool to communicate with your student about those kind of topics. And then one last slide for me, I kind of talked a little about junior year, spring, when you start to forecast, think about classes for senior year, really keep in mind what I said about balancing rigor and GPA. And also, students really want to balance senior year too. If your student's thinking about applying to colleges, applying to competitive schools, that's time consuming. So you really want to start to think about that as well. Graduation requirements, we've had community service as a graduation requirement and senior projects. The last 2 years for our seniors, that's kind of been impacted by COVID. I think for your group, juniors this year, we're still planning on having 75 hours of community service. It's usually 100 to graduate, but that's been reduced due to COVID. And 50 of those hours, or at least half of those hours, is when it was 100, could be paid work. The senior project was also a graduation requirement, has been last year. And again, this year, we are not doing senior projects because of COVID. It's given us a chance to have a bigger conversation about senior projects and how to really make those worthwhile and valuable for our students. And so that's being discussed now, and juniors will learn about what senior projects may look like for them, but senior projects are not something that even gets started until the summer after junior year. So nothing you or your student really need to think about now, but we just wanted to put that out there in case anyone is wondering. Keep grades up, like I've already mentioned. So junior year is a great time if your student is thinking about college to visit campuses. Not a great time due to the pandemic, but some campuses are open. So we do have seniors who have traveled and visited campuses. If you happen to, be in an area or take a road trip, you could always kind of get out and just walk around a campus with a mask. One really cool thing that's come out of the pandemic is a lot of these colleges have really beefed up their websites in terms of virtual tours, virtual information sessions, great ways for students to start to learn about a college. So encourage your students and you as well to kind of check some of these out. And then another important thing junior year is students who are applying or think they're going to apply to schools that require the ACT or ACT. We encourage students to take those tests in the spring of junior year, hoping by then we'll be able to be a test site again for the ACT and SAT. I wanted to also mention the PSAT, which juniors usually have the opportunity to take on our campus during the school day in October. We didn't have that this year because many schools did not have that opportunity this fall. The board has given schools the opportunity to offer the PSAT on January 26th. And so we are going to offer the PSAT to a limited number of juniors. We're only offering 30 because we want to do everything COVID safe and distancing. If you are a junior who is interested in signing up, or if you are a parent or guardian who has a junior who's interested in signing up, there's information in the Grisogram. Mr. Montero, here is your contact person, or you can reach out to me and I will forward you on to Mr. Montero. But I encourage juniors to sign up as soon as possible if they do want to take advantage of that opportunity.
Okay, good segue there for me to jump in there, Jen. Appreciate that.
Your email in the chat too.
Okay, cool. So my portion here is based off of a survey we sent out to the students about mid-October. After this point, this part of the presentation, just kind of think about it, and maybe you might want to kind of retouch some of this with your child and gauge the temperature a little bit. So it's been a month. So basically responses out of the students were about 709. Sophomores were the ones who responded the most, so they get the credit for that. So, but juniors did fairly well too. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. All right, so one of the questions or scopes that we kind of looked at were the stress levels students were feeling this year. Basically, obviously for distance learning online, how they felt about it. And if you look at the graph there, basically between 3 and 4 is the midway point. Kids tended to feel pretty stressed because of the environment. Let's go on to the next slide. Mental and social health on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is struggling every day just to get out of bed. 5 doing amazing. It's not phasing them at all, really. Once again, midpoint bell curve. If you think bell curve, most kids were between being pretty down or stressed to feeling pretty good. So they fell in the halfway point. The majority of kids did. And once again, we thought this was important to share with parents just to get an idea where the students were at. You might, your child might fall in the middle. They might fall on the opposite ends of the scale if they're feeling pretty good, or if they're feeling very, very stressed. Better than we do. We field a lot of calls from students and parents. We do have somewhat of an idea, but as a parent, be aware. Next slide, please. Okay, do you have and this slide made us all feel pretty good, actually. Do you have a safe adult you can talk to and confide in? The majority of kids felt they did, whether it was their parent or an adult that they know, or a teacher or a counselor. That was pretty reassuring that we realized that most kids felt that they had someone to go to. Okay, what do you do for stress management? If you look at some of those really quick, we've got more detailed responses in the next slide, but you can take a look at that. What we liked about this too, what we discussed amongst ourselves, was most of these coping mechanisms were easily accessible, easy to go to. They weren't elaborate trips to a foreign country. It didn't involve a lot of money. So if you look at that, you can get an idea how the kids are coping amongst themselves. Some of them are breathing, listening to music, drawing, spending time with those they love, taking photographs, playing video games, going for a drive, going on walks, playing music, skateboarding, praying, talking about it, watching Glee with my mom. I think that was one of my favorite ones right there. Running, playing with my dogs, work, listening to music, FaceTime with friends, so on and so on. So you can get an idea how your children are coping with the current situation. Okay, how has distance learning affected your physical body and overall physical health or activity? Let's go on to the next slide. So some of the kids' responses, we put some of the negative aspects of the current situation, some of the positive ones. Some said that it's good. I've been working out every day. I golf 9 hours a week. This might be a positive for this child because they're probably going to be pretty good by the time this is over. It stayed pretty par, not much change, not well. I'm lazier. I've gained 20 pounds, probably due to inactivity. This one I think concerned me a lot too, because that just has some negative impact on self-esteem as well. I'm still active. I don't go outside because I'm on a computer. Another one that kind of raised concerns. I am out of shape now. It's improved. I barely exercise, so no good change. I spend way more time sitting and doing nothing. Has made me realize that being active is more important than I thought it was. I work out a lot more now because I have a more flexible time. So you can see it's a mixed variety of responses and how it's impacted certain people.
Hey, Maurice, can I jump in and share an example real quick?
Yep, you sure can. Go ahead.
I was just telling my fellow counselors today that, we've been asking students kind of what they're doing after this survey came out, and more and more of my students are talking about kind of routines that they've started to develop just in the last month or two as they've kind of acclimated to this. And a student yesterday talked about how absolutely fatigued he'd been feeling, obviously during 5-6 hours of Zoom time. And as of about a month ago, he got himself up at 7:30. He takes a 2-mile jog. He says that energizes him for the day. And then after the school day, he takes a half-hour walk. And he says that's what he uses to just calm and orient toward the colors and the weather and the nature and get himself outside. And then he drinks a lot more water than he used to. And he says those 3 things alone have absolutely changed his experience. And I just think it's really, really admirable, again, how some of our students are kind of figuring out new schedules that, again, will benefit them in many aspects of their life.
All right, cool. All right, so next one, connections. Share an idea how we can create connections with each other socially distanced and COVID safe. So next slide, some really, really interesting and good responses from some kids. FaceTime, one said there isn't a way. I hang out with friends on Discord, distance and mass picnics. No idea. More breakout rooms and Zoom classes. I don't think we should. I think it's best for now that we are safe. Very conscientious person there. IDK, I don't know. Playing with them on the Xbox, sorry about that. Have cameras on during Zoom. That's interesting too, trying to stay connected virtually. My friends and I used, and I'm going to interject here, this was my favorite one here. As a parent, I would have never thought of this, but after reading this, I would probably totally take this on board. My friends and I use a browser extension called Netflix Party. We watch movies and make commentary. I think that's just a great way to spend an evening, to just kind of share an experience like that together. Socially distanced movie night at park, wear masks, and Zoom hangouts with friends and family. So as parents, I think being creative and touching base with your child to come up with creative ways of kind of forming those connections that's been lost during this time. Really, really important to try to maintain that, the connections as much as possible. Okay, next slide. Oh, before we go on, one more thing, I'm going to interject here real quick. I thought there was a graph that showed how kids were coping, and what we noticed out of the graph was that kids are finding ways of coping with the amount of stresses that are occurring in their lives. I'm a big history buff, and I kind of liken this period to, like, maybe a major conflict that the world had, two of them. At the onset of those conflicts, World War II being the most known, is that, like, in the beginning phases of that conflict, it was looking pretty negative for the Allied powers. It wasn't looking very good. There's a lot of negativity, isolation. People weren't sure if they should get involved, especially the States. But as you know, the outcome as time went on and leaders kind of tried to tackle those world problems and motivate people and keep them positive, the outcome did turn out positive for the world, I'd like to think. Of course, there were ripple effects with that lasted decades. What I'm curious about too is, as our students and our children are finding coping mechanisms and we're providing that support for them, just keep in touch with your child, and I'm sure there's going to be positive ripple effects from this, and there's going to be somewhat negative ones. So just be aware of that. I had an hour-long discussion with a parent tonight, or earlier tonight, and we talked about that, and she believes her son's going to be much more savvy technologically wise. But as far as socially, the experiences that he's missing out this year is concerning. So just be aware of that, and just try to gauge that with your children. And that's my rant. So next slide, and we'll go from there.
Well, that's a good segue, Maurice. I think that, one of our big challenges as parents is kind of dealing with our own sense of isolation and kind of hopelessness, and making sure that, again, we are still guiding our children with some degree of optimism and focus on what is right, and that this is a temporary situation. In so many ways, obviously, we are very fortunate in terms of where we live and the supports we have for ourselves here. What we're going to bring up right now and focus on is a lesson that our students had during advisory about a week ago today. And the reason we're bringing it up again is just to kind of include you in that lesson, so that you might piggyback on that and have some follow-up conversations. And the lesson focused on strengths. And because, again, we're talking a lot about challenges and grieving at this point. And we want to balance that with focusing on strengths and building resilience. So we looked at character strengths specifically, because character strengths are kind of these unique strengths that all of us have that are kind of a mixture between hardwired kind of aptitudes and social emotional skill sets. And, you know, the research that has been done on character strengths looks at kind of, you know, what the benefits of those are when we focus on those and when we engage in those that we have kind of the strongest strengths in. And we know it boosts confidence, increases happiness, and you can kind of see reduces stress, helps us accomplish skills, those kinds of things. So we told them a little bit about character strengths, and then we introduced them to the 24 character strengths that have been identified in these 6 categories. And we asked them to just kind of glance at this chart and just kind of look at what resonated with them and what they saw as some of their key character strengths. And as you notice, these are character strengths that are valued across cultures, across like globally. We know that we all have them in varying degrees. Some we have less, some we have more. That's just the way strengths work. But we know that when we focus on those that we have, we do better. So we then had students go to this website, and you can go ahead and take a photo if you like, and write it down. And it takes about 10 minutes. And most of them took the youth survey. There's an adult survey also. And they got a free response right away. We would love parents and guardians to go ahead and take this also, because it's really provides some wonderful material for conversations during this time. After the students received their report, we kind of gave them a few little quick assignments. This is an example here on the right side of the screen. You see an example of the top 5 strengths. And the way this VIA report works with students and adults is that they kind of identify those top 5 strengths as your core strengths, kind of your little bit of your unique fingerprint, and make a point of saying that when we are engaged in expressing those strengths, we feel, again, much happier, more motivated, and more connected to other people. What we also know about these strengths is that when people around us notice our strengths, we feel much better. And so we are looking at kind of a little bit of a follow-up lesson around how our students can notice those strengths in people around them also as peers to peers during this time. When we look at this sample result, and you look at these 5 strengths out of the 24, you can tell that this student has some really, there's all sorts of potential here in ways to use these strengths to cope with the current times. We know just from the list before that Maurice read off that lots of our students are using creativity in ways. They're embroidering, they're painting, they're doing photography, they're cooking. You know, some of them are making movies. Love of learning. Our kids are amazing at researching topics on YouTube and reading articles on Reddit and all sorts of things. Honesty, you know, being able to be forthright and express our feelings out there about what's going on is a huge strength. Curiosity, perspective taking. This is, again, an amazing strength. And again, when we notice that and grow that in others, we're leaning into building resilience and optimism and hope, which I think are really critical right now. I do want to mention before we move on that it is not unusual for students and adults when they get their results on something like this to look at their bottom list. There's 24, and to go straight for number 24 and say, oh my gosh, look at that. That is especially typical for an adolescent who is feeling more self-conscious just because of their developmental age, more self-doubting because of their developmental age. But as adults, we can chime in there and really help them look at those results in a balanced way, and realize that those less strong strengths are still strengths. They're just rated, and we can always choose strengths to try to grow as we move along. All right. So Brianna's going to kind of close us out before we get to our Q&A.
Yeah, so as Diane and Maurice sort of alluded to, we're trying to just notice the positive during this time. It can be really challenging and sort of easy, I guess, to think about all the negatives, but there's actually a lot of positives that are going on and that we're noticing from our student body. So because of their rapidly developing prefrontal cortexes, our students are able to learn new skills and information more quickly than we can. An example of this is with technology. A lot of times we're asking our students or our children to help us, figure out how to access technology. Distance learning is obviously not ideal. Some students are learning how to cope with it and they actually really enjoy it. But a lot of our students really just thrive off of that social engagement with their peers. And yes, the pandemic is causing stress, but so many of our students are resilient and really figuring out creative ways to cope, as Maurice spoke to a little earlier. And our students all have really unique and powerful character strengths. So again, we just encourage you to talk to your students about their character strength, their VIA results. And then if you want to, you can also, as a family, maybe each do your own to see what your strengths are. And then that's just a really a great way to facilitate conversation.
Before we move on to our question period, I do want to just kind of close out by saying that, in the counseling office, we really do field a lot of concern and we One thing I do want to offer as something that's hopeful for us and what we're experiencing is when we think about that process of grieving, and I think we're all have gone through different kinds of that process. There is a point where we begin to accept, and we have been noticing just in this last month or so. That survey was actually taken about a month ago, and boy, things are changing every week. And what we've noticed is more and more students kind of accepting kind of where we're at, and then getting creative and starting to shift and create new structures and new ways to connect. So I do want to offer that to you all as a place of kind of hope and encouragement. We are an adaptable species. We are a flexible species, and it's been pretty amazing to watch what's happening and be part of it here. And we are feeling, again, optimistic with the way we're watching our students handle things. Okay, we are moving on to Q&A now, and what we'll do, we want to take advantage of having Rebecca Garmati here as our administrator. We will go ahead and take questions. I think probably it'll make most sense from the chat, and just kind of repeat them out loud so we can answer them for the entire group, and we will try to get to as many as we can. So please go ahead and submit your questions, thoughts, concerns. We are also very open to suggestions, by the way. We got some wonderful suggestions at our sophomore parent guardian night that we've already shared with administration and teachers. All right. Jen, do you see Jen, moderator?
Just seeing if there's any questions.
There was one earlier.
Everyone can see them now too. Oh, who do you email for the PSAT? That's Maurice Montero sent. There's a lot of questions coming in. And I could put his email in there again. There's one question, is the end of January still the next milestone of determining the next plan for in-person or hybrid? Maybe Rebecca, maybe you could answer that one.
Yes, it is. Yep, when we'll be coming back from winter break here, we'll be assessing the metrics in the county and see if we're able to move forward with any in person. It would definitely start with the first layer of what's called limited in person, really looking at those students that are struggling tremendously and have a lot of impacts going on, and getting them on campus first, and then slowly peeling back the layers and adding more and more students as we can. Would be the process for that.
Great. Someone mentioned that they're concerned about community service opportunities, and I was messaged privately that they thought there was information in the Grizogram that community service hours for the class of 22 had been reduced to 25 hours. So that wasn't the information I was giving. So maybe we can get some clarification about that out to junior parents later this week, and also potentially about senior projects.
And additionally, the parent asked if distance will still be an option for the remainder of the year. Certainly, we understand there's going to be some families that will not want their students to return if in-person becomes an option. And yes, that to remain distance we're going to allow that for families that want to remain in distance learning.
I saw a question just to also kind of about motivation and just kind of the more kind of the long-term kind of consequences of kind of this period that we are experiencing. And I know that we are beginning to talk kind of about that, about what we want to have in place when we do return, and knowing that we won't be returning to and moving right back to normal, that there are lots of changes, and we're going to be thinking and planning and working really hard to have supports in place for students, and we're all learning together.
So one question was posed was, one of the reasons my student feels overwhelmed is because after spending all day in Zoom meetings, she then has to do hours of homework each day and night. There isn't enough time to do all this and still do something like get outdoors to relieve anxiety and stress. Have you considered reducing or eliminating homework? Rebecca, can you help me with this? Because you're the administrator, and I know we just talked about this today, actually.
Sure, yeah. We are definitely, like all of you, this is the first time that administration and teachers have had to deal with learning how to teach in this modality, and we're learning a lot, and it's a process, and we are doing as much in-servicing and professional developing on tweaking and monitoring, adjusting, and hearing parent and student feedback, and where can we make adjustments, where can we trim curriculum, but yet still, be able to get enough content in there that teachers can allow for a passing grade. So our teachers already have made some adjustments, and I think there'll be some more between now till the end of the term. And then we also are looking at areas that we can monitor and adjust and tweak for second semester, and set second semester up even more successfully based on what we've learned with first semester. So there will not be a policy that all high school teachers won't be giving any homework at all, but I think there'll be an adjustment with lots of teachers adjusting that and getting into a better fit that's working for them and students.
Sorry about that. The other thing I want to mention along that line with what Rebecca said is, we are really making an effort to keep the door open for students to still get work in that's very, very late or very, very incomplete. What we realize is, like I was mentioning, that this has been a real process of adjustment. And we have quite a few students right now who are actually just kind of surfacing and getting their feet on the ground. And we really want you to know that your students are able to access old assignments, could be a couple weeks old, maybe even a month old, complete that assignment, turn it in, and get credit. So we don't want students to take on, a huge pile of undone things, but sometimes there's strategic ways to do that and address a few assignments that seem to really make a big difference in their grade and really lift their spirits. So if you need any support or guidance around that, please contact one of your counselors.
Karen asked a question about gap years. And
1 second, Jen, I just wanted to say, I just saw that many teachers have locked overdue assignments. So if an overdue assignment is locked at this point, please let your counselor know and we'll help communicate that and get that unlocked. You can also communicate directly to your student's teacher and let them know that you're aware that your student can access that assignment, and would you ask them to please unlock it. Okay, Jen, go ahead and.
Oh, it was just a parent had a question about gap years and the pros and cons, and especially with COVID. And I know we're wanting to try to finish up by 6:30. So I'm happy to stick around and talk about that or answer other questions. So I don't know if you want to address any of these other more, direct classroom homework type stress issues that a lot of parents might have interest in. And I could follow up with the gap year question after that.
Also, there was one question. It said there was difficulty with streamlining how students track and submit their assignments. It differed from one class to the next, which got confusing. Is this being resolved?
Rebecca, you want to take that one?
I think it just depends on which teacher and which class. I know our super users have been doing a lot of in-servicing and setting up times with teachers to try to make things more streamlined and get them to understand that, it can be set up one way and then it's the same for everybody. It's just the teachers accessing that super user support and making sure they know that that's there so they can make those adjustments and make things similar from class to class.
I also see a question that again kind of touches back on motivation, and especially challenging for parents who aren't at home to be able to kind of prompt and prod. You make such a good point, Yolanda, because in a regular classroom, as we know, our students have less developed prefrontal cortexes, and so asking them to again discipline themselves and keep themselves on a schedule and a routine and get their work done in a really timely way is a tall order for any adolescent, and many of us adults, without that kind of classroom teacher prompting, reminding, structuring them, saying, okay, now we're moving to this. So we are there's a lot of kids who are getting together after school on FaceTime and doing homework together through FaceTime. If you as a parent could really use some kind of third-party support and kind of having a discussion with your child about some strategies, do reach out to one of us, because I do know that students hear advice and strategies very differently from a different adult than their own parent. And it's this whole kind of again, format is tough because it kind of mixes teaching and parenting in some ways. So please do use us. We're very busy, but we are really trying hard to have as many of those individual phone or Zoom meetings with your students as possible.
And then, Jen, I don't know if you saw this one question, wondering approximately when college nights will begin to occur.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of questions that are coming in both in the everyone and privately to me about gap years and college nights. And so usually I start doing, well, juniors and sophomores can come to any of the college information or financial aid nights. I had freshman mother and daughter come to scholarship night last week and that was great. They got a lot of really good information about what's ahead. I thought maybe there'd be some junior parents and kids because it was advertised in the Grizogram, but I don't think there were. So I'll start doing College 101, Financial Aid 101. So those will be in the Grizogram. We're also starting a counseling office newsletter, so you should look for information in there. Some people have been mentioning, since we were talking about gap year, I'm happy to, so it's almost 6:30. Do you want me to go into this now, Diane, or do you want to wait? And
Yeah, there's one other kind of mention in the chat that I'm really excited about just because community service came up, and Jamie Hayden, who's a new addition, not a new addition to Ashland School District. She's been at the middle school, but she's joined us half-time as a health and a leadership teacher here, and we're so fortunate to have her. But she just mentions that she's received a big list of community service ideas that are COVID safe. So we will make a point of getting those communicated out to our students, because I just had 2 students actually call me today and ask me about community service. They are wanting to feel connected, wanting to feel like they've got some purpose and ready to go. So thank you, Jamie, for that. We'll get that out. And then let's just, before we go into gap year, let's see if there's
I just wanted to address the 10 hours a day on screen. You know, that never has been an expectation of any of us here at the high school. It's going to depend on what classes your student is in and how that teacher is using that 85-minute block. Teachers are learning to adjust that and meet students' needs and break that up in creative ways. There is also, you are able to participate in class 100% asynchronously if you need a day off screen or your student to do something maybe at their own pace, because everything on Canvas they can access and see the video that's posted of the lesson of the day, the assignments. So maybe they take that, you know, the morning off and they spend an hour or 2 looking and seeing what they missed. The most important part is to communicate with the teacher. I wasn't in class today, but this is what I'm doing. And they still get marked as for attendance, participating asynchronously. So I understand that stress, and I hear that from parents and students. And I often talk with parents and students and kind of coach them on what taking an asynchronous day would look like and how that might alleviate some of the screen time.
I was also going to say, I don't think it came up tonight, but you brought up last night or with the sophomore meeting that hard copy books are available for all of the English classes and that students have been given PDFs, but again, that's more screen time. So if a student wants to request a hard copy of the book, who do they need to email and then they can pick it up?
Yeah, emailing any hard, you know, if your student wants an actual hard copy of any of the novels that they're using, all our textbooks are available hard copy. So just letting the teacher know, or Amy Cork is our teacher librarian, that you would like a hard copy, and then we do have materials pick up on a weekly basis.
Also, just to let everyone know, it looks like someone's asking about notes for this. We'll post a recording of the meeting with the PowerPoint on our website and on our YouTube channel. All right, do you want to address gap year, Jen?
Sure. Okay, so this is how we deal with gap year at the high school. We tell all seniors, great if you have an idea, a plan, want to take a gap year. Gap year means that you're thinking of going to college the next year. So you treat your senior year like you're going to college the next year. You apply to college, you apply for financial aid. Most colleges will let you defer. A lot of scholarships will also let you defer. They'll say, great, go have a wonderful gap year doing whatever you're planning, and we let us know when you're starting school, we'll send your money then. One parent asked, if a student takes a gap year, will it impact their financial aid? It depends on what their educational pathway is. So if a student is planning to go to a community college and wants to use the state's Oregon Promise Grant, which is trying to make community college affordable for all students, the student has to start at a community college within 6 months of graduating from high school. So there's that. That's one of the issues. Some of the scholarships, some of our biggest scholarships, the Ford Family Foundation scholarships, students have to start the year after they graduate from high school. So it really depends on the student, their pathway, their plan, their financial resources. But the way we treat it at Ashland High School, as I work with seniors, all through senior year in their college and career readiness class, which we probably should have had on the slide, that's something that all students will have of senior year, where they have time to work on college applications, start the financial aid applications, get scholarship information. Everyone in there, even if they're taking a gap year, I really encourage them to apply to colleges and financial aid and all of that while they have access to us, our help, and also for parents for the whole financial aid process. Even if your student's taking a gap year, you want to complete the FAFSA your student's senior year. Another parent asked, what about COVID, gap years? I mean, I'm not really an optimist, but I feel by next fall, colleges will be operating pretty much as normal. A lot of them are really operating that way now. They've created somewhat of a bubble and are having hybrid classes. I think there will be some degree of normalcy next fall. But applicant pools, because of COVID last year and a lot of students deferring from last year, tons of kids got off of the wait list last year into competitive schools who probably wouldn't have gotten into those competitive schools before. I don't know how that's going to go to for our senior class this year. They're applying to a lot of competitive schools as well. I'm big guessing game, I'm sure, and looking at the numbers for these admissions committees for your students' class, the class of 22. I'm guessing we're going to be somewhat back to normal by the fall of their first year of college. So I'm not anticipating that being a huge question like it is for this year's seniors in terms of how they're envisioning their freshman year being. And again, at that point, I'm not sure how it will impact college admissions, but I always encourage students to apply to the schools that they're interested in going to, and students always have reach schools and more safety schools that they think they'll be able to get into or have a pretty good sense. But what it comes down to, our students, they get into a lot of their reach schools, but what it comes down to is having a financial safety school, a school that they're excited to go to and that their family can really afford. And so your students, and if you come to my meetings, you'll start to hear a lot about that, because it's a really important family conversation to begin to have junior year and into senior year.
Yeah, I noticed James Bauer, who's been on an admissions committee, is talking about colleges being, a lot more flexible. Yeah. I also wanted to respond to the question about, I think from Jesse, saying that not all teachers are marking students present when a student has maybe participated asynchronously and communicated to the teacher that they're keeping up with things. So please, again, please go ahead and either email the teacher, or if you don't feel comfortable emailing the teacher and you want this to be something that remains anonymous, please email us. We are advocates and communicators, so please let us know. And we can reach out to teachers in a general way and say, hey, we've noticed something that's getting in the way here, and that's not according to our policy. So please communicate, and we will try to address that. As many of us have said, we're all learning. We're all trying to get on the same page, but it's a bumpy road. Okay.
And for parents who like hard copy and don't like to read too much online too, there are hard copies of the AHS College Handbook. We're running out of them, but I'm going to get some more printed. So at a certain point, if you want to email me, they will be available for distribution on the Wednesday pickup days as well.
So I think we're at a good point to, close down here, and thank you all. Again, if you have other questions, suggestions, please don't hesitate to email your administration or one of us. The next junior meeting that we will probably have for parents is going to be probably toward the middle of February, and is going to focus on kind of getting folks ready for that forecasting process and helping and supporting their students and selecting classes for the following year. A counseling newsletter will be coming out in January, and we're going to try to just put that out once a month so we don't overwhelm you with, again, as much kind of efficient and upbeat information as we can. Thank you all for your comments. It's really nice to hear. All right. We will try to get some notes out too. We got some feedback on that, and we'll get the recording posted.
Yeah, and some people were saying they couldn't copy the links, but you can just click on them and then you'll have it in your browser and save it from there. So.
You broke up, Jen. I don't think they got all that info.
Oh, okay. If you just click on the links, even though you can't cut and paste them, you can just open it in your browser and then you'll have the access to the link. Could you hear me that time, Maurice?
I could hear you now. I can hear you now, yes.
I have an unstable connection at my house, I've been told.
Yeah, and thanks for all the positive feedback. I think that the adults need support too. I mean, teachers, admin, counselors, and parents as well. So thanks for all the positive comments.
And Diane, maybe you want to stop sharing the screen, and then if anyone wants to hang out and ask questions, they could turn on their camera and we could get some of that positive connection, seeing people. Hi, Jamie. Hi, Zia.
All right, anyone who wants to take off, feel free, enjoy the rest of the evening. Jen and I will hang out for a few more minutes.
You guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Get in bed before midnight tonight, Missy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we should all get on screen. And like,
I know, right? Little,
Yeah.
little
Laura,
network
can I see
here.
you?
Yeah, are you guys DC trips or no way, Jose, right?
Say that again, Jamie.
Oh, I was talking to Zia.
Oh,
I don't know if she can unmute. Sorry. I was crossing paths and networking. She's a
she
DC.
can unmute. She has permission.
All right. Bye.
Have a good evening, Jamie.
You.
Oh, someone trying to get back in.
Hey, Jennifer, I just wanted to say hi really quick. And then I'm excited for my daughter, Zia. That's Karen Oppenheim. How are you?
Oh my gosh. Hi, Karen.
Can I just say to all you staff, being a creator teacher,
I was going to say, are you still a creator?
I'm still a creator.
That
Just
was a huge loss for us.
everything you guys are saying is exactly what we're experiencing. You know, it's what my friends in the Bay Area are experiencing. And I think it's awesome that you guys are so focused on the positive. And I mean, I think you're helping kids get through it the best that anyone can. So I just want to say thank you for what you're doing.
And back to you.
Yeah, great to see you, Karen.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. I was like, there's Jen.
I was like, hi, Zia.
You'll see more of her too.
No, is she your oldest?
Yeah, so she's our oldest, and you
Okay.
probably see her working at Sauce, and she's around.
Oh, cool. Okay. Oh, if I go in there,
She's and
Yeah.
so I was going to say to Jamie, I was glad that you guys put out that list because she's also really interested in volunteering.